Able to see on your machines the vote now?
Supervisor Romden? We believe it was Supervisor Vollenweider. Do you recall? Okay, Supervisor Vollenweider, so we'll make that addition, that correction.
Okay, and then also one other thing, the roll call vote was 11 ayes and 8 nays. I would like to see the names of those people, supervisors added in there, just 11 ayes and 8 nays.
Do we have the names?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections, additions, questions? Okay, so we're going to try this again. All in favor of the motion, or you just simply register your vote? Ross? Or, hey, I'm missing one, right? Oh, who was the late one? Maybe. Maybe we could come up with an alternative, and maybe we could just give Supervisor Lucas a paddle that he can, you know, he can hold up. Okay, citizens input. Do we have any citizens input this month? We have no one. Does anyone wish to speak? Does anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Okay. Appointments, we have none this month. Annual reports and other reports to the board. Public Safety Facility Study Committee report. There we are.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I have to use that. All right. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us this chance to come back. And basically what we want to do tonight is kind of back the train up. And I want to start off, I guess, with an apology that if it seemed like we were moving at too fast of a pace, for those that are new to the board, even for some of those may have been existing on the board, you know, I apologize. And we want to slow this down. And at this point, we're even going to back it up a bit. So what we're going to provide tonight is a review of where we've been and where we currently are and the decisions before us. I'm going to start with a video that we made. Actually, the Kewaunee High School students put this together. I think they did a great job. It's been posted to the county website, the sheriff's website for about 1.5 years. But again, maybe some weren't aware of it or didn't have a chance to view it. It does a very good job of basically a virtual tour of the current jail. You're going to see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off.
Morning, I'm Lieutenant Chris Van Aaron with Kewaunee County Sheriff's Department. I'm the jail administrator here. I'm just going to be talking about the Kewaunee County Jail as we look at the jail project. We're very excited to be at this phase of the development of a plan to hopefully replace the current facility. As you guys are well aware, that facility was built in 1968, the oldest and smallest in the state of Wisconsin. You know, that being said, it creates a lot of difficulties, a lot of struggles and challenges.
A couple of the issues with the facility are the security itself and the facility itself. Our average daily population for the Kewaunee County Jail is 41 inmates. In the Kewaunee County Jail, we have 22 beds that are pretty much full at all times. With the overflow of individuals we have incarcerated here, we house approximately 10 inmates in the Dorner County Jail and other jails throughout the state that we can find beds in. This is a cost of approximately $10,000 to $12,000 a month for the taxpayers of Kewaunee County.
One of the issues with Kewaunee County Jail is that this being a 50-year-old facility is that it's not ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act. The shower stalls are not wide enough. The cell blocks themselves, the doors aren't wide enough to facilitate a restraint chair or other security devices that we may use to safely handle individuals that are being non-compliant at the time. The roof is leaking. Computer systems and things that we use to do our jobs every day requires a lot more space as far as wiring, phone lines. Those lines are being run through the ceiling tiles, and that's where the water is coming in. It usually doesn't make for a good combination of water and electricity.
During the summer, we have a lot of computer equipment in the dispatch center. A lot of monitors, a lot of computers running at the same time. This being a brick building, when it gets to be 85, 90 degrees, the AC cannot keep up with the warm temperatures in the building. And the officers are doing their jobs, basically sweat running down their faces. And, but it's the building that we have, and the heating and cooling system can't keep up.
Earlier this January, when we had the severe cold temperatures in the building, we were approximately probably 40 to 50 degrees in the building with the heating system not being able to keep up. We had to place heating units throughout the building just to try and make this a workable environment. In Kewaunee County, with our officers being dual rolled, jailer working as a dispatcher's backup, dispatcher working as a jailer's backup, our dispatch center and our jail are combined. This is a significant security issue, with the dispatch center being the main emergency services point. Anytime anyone calls 911, it goes to our dispatch center. From there, the officers dispatch fire, rescue, law enforcement. In the dispatch center, there's no secure barrier between the dispatch center and the booking area, where there are individuals who have been arrested and may not be very happy with officers at the time. But there's nothing to keep them from getting into the dispatch center other than the officer working. 911 lines are out of date. We cannot get the mapping system any longer for the equipment that we have.
But the other component I really like to focus on is the need for services. You know, when we bring people into the jail, yes, they're being remanded there by the courts because of a conviction, something that they had done, a decision they make, an offense that they engaged in that brought them to our jail. So let's say that it's OWI. That in and of itself, you know, they might get a 30-day, a 60-day. And while we have to, you know, keep them in custody within our jail, we also want to make sure that their time with us during that custody has some impact on their life and their life decisions. And many times the things that bring them into our jail, the decisions they make, the situations that people get themselves into, has underlying causes. It's not just, hey, we decided to be rowdy on a Saturday night, or I just decided to get into that fight, that domestic. There's probably some underlying causes, and we need to get to those to truly change behavior. So the need for programming, the need for services, I think is huge, and we need to make sure we're incorporating that into our planning. The second part is mental health. The need for mental health services is significant. Those that are incarcerated, they figure up to probably 80 to 90% of them struggle with some sort of mental health issues. We're not just looking at this project from strictly a sense of incarceration. You know, we have a 22-bed facility and we have to house, let's say on an average 39 or 40 people. That's a part of it. We need to address that. That's mathematically inadequate, right? That number shouldn't be lower than that number. So mathematically, yes, we have an issue with overcrowding. That's an easy statement to make, but I think we have an opportunity here to dig deeper and go beyond the issue of just incarceration numbers to talk about how do we address recidivism, how do we address the needs of those that are coming into our justice system.
All right, so thank you for your patience and sitting through that. I think, again, that does a great job for those that haven't been able to visit that jail. That's what it looks like. And when we talk about roofs leaking, that's a reality. When we talk about failing heating systems, cooling systems, we're going to hear from our jail inspector. We're fortunate enough to have Nancy Thielen here tonight, and she's going to speak to these, you know, not just inadequacies, you know, these are significant deficiencies. So what I'm going to do is just bring up a quick PowerPoint here that's, again, going to kind of back up the train, and we're going to, there we are. What I'd like to do is basically just, again, start this sort of from square one. So we talk about the issues with the current jail. We did extensive studies consisting of statistic and future predictions. We all know that our current jail is beyond capacity. The population is likely to increase. Now, far be it, any sort of an explosion, but anybody knows that there is going to be increases in the future. The current location, we talk about location, not just the building, but where it's located, we're pretty much stringed down. I mean, that footprint, that complex allows for no growth. The current jail does not meet our current needs, even if renovated. And again, we're going to speak to this in a little bit. You cannot turn this thing into something it's not. So even if we threw a couple million at this building, we are still woefully inadequate in how we're going to be able to address this. And so we have to talk about at what point we basically say, this building's met our needs. It's been a good building for over 50 years, but we need to move on. And again, we have no training space for programming, training, exercise, or storage. Any questions on this slide? I'm going to stop at each one and just ask if anybody has any questions on each slide. All right, we're going to move on. So, smallest jail in the state, 22 bed. We've got issues with everything from electrical, plumbing, heating. The doors and locks, they're antiquated. We literally have to have somebody make them by hand. The companies that made these are long since gone. They don't exist. We talk about our average daily population pre-COVID was over 30, around 33. Again, and the jail inspector is going to speak to this, programming, rehabilitation, the things that are going to make a difference in future housing numbers. If we do nothing with these individuals, yeah, we're going to continue to see these numbers go up. But if we can actually look at how we can reach them and deal with addiction, mental health, whatever it may be, now we can make some inroads. We have no positive pressure rooms. This is a big deal. That when we have somebody that comes in and they're significantly ill, we have to be able to put them in a place where it's not going to contaminate the rest of the building as well as its population. And overall, it's unsafe. It's unsafe for the staff because it's full of blind areas. It's a linear structure. We've heard this many times over. It is full of blind spots. It is a liability. Some other things. We have pipes breaking, ceiling leaks, cracks in walls. It's falling apart below our feet, literally. We're going to talk in a little bit about what a substantial remodel means and how that relates to our compliance with DOC 350. Because once we do when we throw any sort of money at this building, we are then no longer grandfathered to be exempt from DOC 350. We will now have to come into compliance with DOC 350. That's a problem. So we have to understand what's the best place to make an investment, right? Because that's what we're being tasked to do. We have to make the wisest investment. So what are we doing now? Oh, I'm sorry, let's go back. Anybody have any questions on this slide? Any questions? So what are we doing now? The problem is, and we've spoken to this in the past, your criminal justice system here in Kewaunee County is only as strong as its weakest link. The weakest link in Kewaunee County is our jail. Every other component of that criminal justice system is making decisions based on the weakest link. So we talk about arrest warrants. In the past, we've had a significant number of arrest warrants. We know we can't serve them because we've got no place to put them. We have jail capacities regarding sentencing. When the judge goes to make a sentence, he knows in the back of his head, boy, I'd really like to sentence this person to this amount of time. But I know the jail can't take it. So he may adjust his sentencing parameters. That's a problem. Probation holds. We work very closely with the Department of Corrections, Community Corrections, and Probation. When people who are out of prison and on probation end up committing crimes, violating, they end up in our jail. Well, these probation agents realize, man, I'd love to put that person on a probation hold, but guess what? The jail can't hold them. So you understand that every component of our criminal justice system is basically adjusting their decisions because of the weakness of this one component. That's a problem. A good example that's at the bottom there, we have somebody that's on a fourth offense OWI. We'd love to be able to house them, but because of our limitations, maybe we don't. Maybe they give them a deferred prosecution. Maybe we put them out on a monitor. They get into another accident and kill a family or kill somebody. And the station says, if that would have been any other county, they'd have been in jail. How come they weren't in jail in Kewaunee County? Because we don't have the room. I'm not looking forward to that interview. Jail capacity. We're going to talk about jail capacity. So we talked about being 22 beds. We're really not even 22 beds. Because to effectively be able to comply with classification, you really have to only run at 80%. Doesn't matter where you are or how big your facility is, you have to always incorporate classification into your housing. Yeah, Mr. Massler.
Supervisor Massler, your mic, please.
In the last slide, not serving arrest warrants. We talked about this a number of meetings ago at Public Safety. And as I recall, we have in the neighborhood of 475 to 500 arrest warrants that cannot be served because we don't have a place to send them.
Correct. Now, to the credit of our county clerk, Becky Turville, what we've had to do then is she's set up plans to try to work out, because a lot of these are failure to pays. So they've worked out some ways in which they can get these people on the books to try to pay. But again, we're not holding them accountable. If somebody has a warrant, they fail to pay the warrant, the result should be they should be arrested. We don't do that in Kewaunee County. They're out and free and about, even though they may be 3 warrants behind. So you're right. For a while we did. And so we had to meet and talk about some solutions. And one of the solutions was, okay, let's put them on a payment plan. So if we can get a buck a week or a buck a month, you know, so the county, unfortunately, in reality is losing out on revenue. You lose on revenue because typically we would go arrest them, which would result in a booking fee, an arrest fee, and actually the warrant fee, right? But they're not. And so now we're become the bank where we're putting these people on a payment plan of a buck a month or whatever it is. So as a business operation, it's no way to run a railroad, but that's where we are with the warrants. So we have dwindled them down, but it's only because we become the bank for these people that have these warrants. I don't think anybody agrees with that, but it's where we are. But thank you for bringing that up. So again, 80%. So we have to understand that 80% because we have to be able to separate based for work release, medium versus maximum security, female versus male, sentence versus pre-sentence. There's a lot of moving parts in a given day in this small little jail. So even at 22, we're woefully over it already. So we have to understand that. And that's part of the planning. When we get later into the numbers of the new jail, people say, well, if that's your daily population and you're building at this number, remember that 80%, remember that number, because it makes no sense to build a jail that we're already upside down when it comes to classification. We have to incorporate classification into those numbers. So let's go back into some history. We're back in the train up. We start off back in 2016, was able to contact the National Institute of Corrections, and they were wonderful enough to bring in a group that justice and jail analysis. So back in spring of 2016, they toured the jail. They actually spoke with the judge, clerk of courts, the DA, all the different components of our criminal justice system to see how is their work impacted by our facility or the lack thereof. It was very interesting when we got done. They made a statement. They said they've looked it over. They did their study. They wrote the report. And they said, you know, we travel the country defending counties, defending county jails in their policy, in their facilities, and what they do. And they said Kewaunee County is undefendable. There were some county board members that are sitting here today that were part of that conversation. They said what we are doing in Kewaunee County is undefendable. That's an important fact. So in about a year later, we were lucky enough to get a grant for technical assistance to run a planning of new institutions workshop. That primarily kind of gave us a roadmap of how to be able to move forward in a project. And they gave us some great direction. What should we think of first? You know, what should we do next? And we tried to adhere to those as far as, you know, bringing on a consultant, standing up a study committee, getting that community outreach and communication. There was some great insight we gained from that planning of new workshops on February 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. So some good input. We then, or I would say you then, as a county board, approved to move to phase 1. That was January 22nd, 2019, with a cost of $60,700. That was the first step. We contracted with Venture to perform the Justice Center study. And another important thing we did is we stood up that public safety committee. That was on April 8th, 2019. I want to speak to that in a little bit. So the phase 1 began with these regular meetings of this public safety study committee. After we'd finished out phase 1, again, we moved it forward to the county board. And on August 20th, they moved to say, yeah, let's go ahead and move to phase 2. That was $67,100. So this is important, I think, as far as an investment that's already been made. So let's look at this public safety study committee, because we do have some members in the room tonight. And I think it's important to see the cross section. the amount of people that were part of this. This wasn't done in isolation or in a vacuum. We had some great input, some great discussions. So we've got a few people here. I'd like to at least allow them a chance to speak. So either Mr. Dorner, if you'd like to, just to give some insight on what he saw, what was his experience on this committee.
Well, my name is Jeff Dorner, lifelong Kewaunee County citizen, living in the town of Red River for the last 30 plus years. In fact, I was on that committee back in the 90s when we were studying the jail. And I've got patience, but you know, when I see what's going on, my patience go down. But the committee has gone through and has analyzed this building. We've gone through and talked about different options and things like that. I, being in the construction industry, look at a project and say, okay, let's grab a hold of this thing, let's get it done, and we'll pay for it, and we'll do it efficiently when we start. But when we pull a project apart and have to add on to it every 5 years or so because we don't have the facilities available, that's wasting money from everybody's standpoint. The amount of people that we've got on that committee and the diversity we have, and pretty much everyone on that committee feels the same way I do, is that we need to do something. I took a tour of the jail in 2019, and I've always been a proud citizen of Kewaunee County. And when I got done walking through that jail, I said, I'm ashamed to be a Kewaunee County citizen. That jail's in bad shape. From a construction standpoint, you know, you look at roofs leaking, you look at putting food in the garage for the people, you look at how it's laid out, it's just a bad situation, guys. So don't want to dwell on it too long, but this needs to get taken care of. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ann, would you like to say a few words? So Ann Kohanic was also a member on the board. And again, I think it's important to see that this was an inclusive group and you're going to get input from others. So I do think it has value. So thank you, Ann, for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. Hi. I was a part of this committee, went to many meetings, and feel like everyone was very thorough and everything was fully discussed, and spent a lot of time trying to be as cognizant of not overspending and not overdoing it. And we looked at very many different options, and I felt we were making very educated choices. And as a taxpayer of Kewaunee County, when he said, oh, we need to build a new jail, I'm thinking, oh, who the heck wants to spend money like that? I'd rather see it used in another way. But to realize that as a county citizen, because of what our law enforcement does, it provides me with a very comfortable and safe environment. And I live in an area where I'm lucky. And I think that's probably something we need to spend money on, even though it's something that we really don't want to. But thank you.
Thank you, Ann. On your desk tonight, I put a copy of a letter written by Mr. John Pavich. Mr. Pavich was also a member of this committee, and he is actually with us virtually. So John, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, can you turn him up?
Can
And
you
we're
hear
adjusting
me?
the volume.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
There you go. Perfect. So go ahead, John, if you have any insight you'd like to offer.
Sure. In addition to the letter that I initially sent you, I did some revisions to it. And let me just read what I have here. It says, my name is John Pavick. I have been a member of the Public Safety Building Committee for almost 4 years. My introduction was a 3-day planning of new institutions workshop put on by the Department of Justice National Institute of Corrections in February of 2017. So I feel like I've been with this project for a while. That introduction assured me that the committee was going to dig deep and work hard to bring the very best recommendations to the county for this project. We toured the Kewaunee County Jail to observe the current situation firsthand, understand the challenges, and better recognize future needs. We visited other counties to tour and evaluate their jails. We talked about what worked and what didn't work in all of those facilities. The committee was presented with multiple proposals from venture architects and considered different model options. We did our best to base our conclusions on a combination of expert and real-world information. In all of our discussions, we seriously considered our legal, community, and fiduciary responsibilities. As one of the few members of the committee who is not affiliated with the county or board of supervisors, I felt particular responsibility to consider the issues from a citizen's perspective. I started on this committee focused mainly on the jail. I came to realize that would be short-sighted as, over time, I've learned more about the interconnectedness of the sheriff's department, jail, and courthouse. The committee was advised and warned by the counties that we visited, not only to address the immediate, but also the near-term future needs, and to look at it from a justice system perspective, not just the parts. In 8 years, our courthouse will be beyond its design service life. The problems with the jail are well known and documented. Ignoring the problem does not eliminate the county's liability. Based on what I've learned, I believe option 7 was the best option. I realize it is asking the taxpayers for a serious amount of money. I understand the sticker shock associated with proposing a Kewaunee County Public Safety building. But I do think it is the best option from a taxpayer's perspective to save millions in future construction costs and have the facilities we need now that will serve us well into the future. It provides for a proximal location for a new court that will be needed soon. If we do not do it all, including the sheriff's office and garage, I am concerned we will look back and see it as an opportunity missed. I know every aspect, excuse me, of the proposed project was well considered and discussed by practical members that we trusted to do a good job. Even if we cannot do it all, the building for option 7, we should do as much as possible. This is not a forever burden if smartly done. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions about my experience with the committee.
All right, thank you, John. I truly appreciate your time tonight. So again, you can see all the various members, and if any members of the board who are also members of that committee have anything to add at this point, I would offer that opportunity to chime in. All right, well then we will continue trudging forward. Let's talk about phase 1. Phase 1 was a needs assessment. We had to find it where we currently were. It was a status check. We had that done back in 2016 with that justice and jail analysis, but now we have the consultant on board. So he basically did just that, a criminal justice system overview, data and assessment, operations and process. He looked at what we do in that jail from the moment somebody's booked in, processed, medically screened, and placed into their cell, moved to courts, moved to hearings, and ultimately released. He looked at best practices. They did a physical assessment of the building, physical structure, operation requirements were considered, and then we put together potential action plans and recommendations. It was finalized, the deliverable, basically, the deliverable was that needs assessment, and every member of the board was provided with that. Each one of these documents, these folders that were provided at the end of each phase, those are posted online. They should either be on the county website or the Kewaunee County Sheriff's website or both, where you can actually look at what was provided as a deliverable at the end of these phases. So that was phase 1.
Mr. Sheriff.
Yes.
Also, if for some reason a county board member wants a paper copy, just contact me and I will get you a hard paper copy as well.
Thank you, Scott. And also this entire PowerPoint, we'll make sure we get that out to all the members so you can look and review this after we're done tonight. So any questions on phase 1? Any questions on phase 1 before I move on? We then moved into phase 2, an operational architectural program. Again, very vague, looking at physical requirements, alternatives. This is where we phase down these options we're going to talk about in a little bit. We finally got down to what's called an architectural program, which is the drawings that you all received last month or the month before. We were able to complete some very broad construction and project budgets, not as refined as we need to be moving forward, but a very broad project budget. And then the staffing plan and budget. Again, basically very broad coming out of phase 2. Phase 3 allows us to really refine both number 4 and number 5. But coming out of phase 2, these were just very broad staffing plan and budgets. Any questions on what came out of phase 2? So here are the options. We start off with 7 options. The ones in yellow were the ones we held on to. The ones not bolded were ones that we discarded. So abandoning the jail, we said, okay, getting out of the jail business, let's go ahead and consider that. Let's have a conversation. Option 2, remodeling that building, by every member of the committee agreed that would be throwing taxpayer money away. That building had lived out its duration, its usefulness, and we needed to move on. So we discarded it. Option 3, again, addition, remodel on site, doing something with that building. It was the consensus that anything dealing with that existing building was money wasted. It just wasn't money well spent. And again, we had some lengthy conversations about that. So we went to options 4 and 5 are very similar. They're basically a new jail, but on site. Option 4 is just the jail, and then option 5 include the jail, sheriff, and the communication center. So those were included for further discussion. Option 6, only the jail off-site, was discarded. Now, when we say only the jail off-site, that would have eliminated anything but the jail. So that we moved on to option 7, which was what we recommended, the new safety building, which was the jail, sheriff's department, communications, evidence, what was proposed in that first recommendation. That was option 7. So those are the 7 options that were provided initially in our process of elimination. Any questions on this? Mr. Wagner.
Not a question, just a comment that something should be added here. If you look at option 4 and option 5, in both of those options, it also included all of the costs that would be involved with option 1. Okay.
And we're going to actually hit that in the next couple slides.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. So,
Mr. Wokus, please use your mic. Press your mic. There you go. Go ahead.
On option 3, why didn't you get some prices on it?
on trying to do an addition or remodel of that current structure?
Yes. You didn't even get a price on it. How do you know what it was?
There, again, any money to spend, you'd be better off starting from ground up.
Get a price on it, then we can decide.
Okay, and that's good insight, so thank you. All right, phase two. So we limited to the 4 options. Option 1, again, was abandon the jail, rent out everything. The issues with that, there's a few. The first is we're not just talking about long-term housing, we're talking about everything that goes on. So let's say the city of Kewaunee has a fresh arrest. They arrest somebody on domestic. There's no jail to go to. That officer's gonna have to take that custodial arrest to another county every time we do the custodial arrest. So the operational implications were huge. Second part is it's only relevant if there are available beds. And I did receive letters from all the adjacent sheriffs from the adjacent counties who said, we'll help you out anytime you can, Matt. We really will. But don't rely on us, because the minute we need our beds back, we'll be giving you notice and you're out. So you're literally leaving an operation dependent on somebody else's whim. That's no way to run a railroad. There's no way to be able to move forward with this jail. It happened to us in Brown County years ago. We had ours housed there. They called us, said have them out in 48 hours. That's a real option. So we had to understand that's nothing that we can move forward on or bank on. But again, we had a discussion. Option 4 with the new jail on the current site. The struggle there is the footprint. The struggle there is you're limiting yourself so badly within that complex that it's not feasible. When we look at the price, to Mr. Wagner's point, it would have cost almost as much as the new facility, and you'd be stuck in that footprint. We'd have to end up probably vacating the street, buying up adjacent residents to provide for parking. It just wasn't feasible. The cost it wasn't worth the match, if that makes any sense. So option 4 was discussed, but the real limitation was that footprint, trying to remain on that campus, on that city block. 5 was very similar. We would have had to actually go up 2 flights or two floors. Due to that, you're adding staffing. So even if you get some short-term construction savings, you're building on a perpetual cost, and that's your staffing. And you can see the cost at the bottom was, it made no logical sense to try to stay on that complex, on that footprint, and spend that kind of money. But again, we discussed it. And then we get to option 7, which was the option 7 at the time that was recommended was a 52-bed jail, expandable to 85, with everything, with the jail support, sheriff's department, 911 communications. Would be built on that open site to the south of Human Services. 1 story, single story, less expensive. But that at the time, and this is what we recommended, and this is what was brought forward, was that 32 to 35. That was significant. But that was the recommendation by the committee when that was made. So we did a revision because we had concerns over that capital cost. So we reevaluated the scope of option 7, came back with a recommendation to remove the sheriff's department offices, remove the garage, and scale back as possible, as much as possible, without jeopardizing the actual operational effectiveness of that building. That new cost estimate came in around that $20 million mark. And that's the discussion currently. So you see how we evolved through this and then kind of scaled it back again. Any questions on this slide? So the jail study recommended moving the jail study to phase 3. That was the recommendation by that study committee to move forward to phase 3. We all know where that ended up, how that went last month, but that was the recommendation from the committee. This is what we're getting in phase 3, and it's important to touch on it because, as I said earlier, what we've gotten so far is just very vague numbers, very vague renditions, images. Doesn't give us much to really work off of as far as really drilling down what are the actual costs going to be, what are the daily costs going to be, the staffing costs. We've got to be able to provide more. What does it look like? Can we actually be able to show the community, here's what you're getting for your money? At this point, I can't show the community what they're getting for the money. And I think that's a disservice. I think we owe it to the community to be able to show them the best detailed drawings, schematics, floor plans, staffing models that we can, because it's their money we're spending. So phase 3 provides quite a bit of information. This just talks about how this was intended, and we understand what had kind of gotten some roadblocks. We really thought this was going to move forward in a matter of a couple month project, allowing for pauses. The big thing here is that we moved along deliberately, which we really tried to keep everybody up to date with where we're going. There were intentional breaks. After phase 1, we broke, right? We stopped, brought it to the board. Any questions? What's your thoughts? Looks good. Motion made. Second it. Let's move forward to phase 3 or phase 2. Phase 3 was finished. We paused. Any questions, concerns? And we want to continue to do that. We want this to be inclusive. Briefings were made to the county board after each phase was completed. So we're going to talk a little bit about our current operations, as well as to your question, Mr. Wokus, about that current building, and talk about any investment made in that current building, because I think that falls squarely in its ability to be able to conform to these new DOC regs. So I'm going to ask our jail inspector, Nancy Thielen, to come on up and speak a little bit to these requirements.
Good evening. I want to start out by just saying what you're going through right now is not easy. I've worked with several counties and county boards on these projects, and it's very difficult. The more information and the more education you can get and to educate yourself, the better. There's no such thing as a silly question in any of this. So what we've talked about through the past couple of years on this board, this just caveats it slightly. Our office, myself, I've been coming to this county since 2005. We have been really stretching and trying to work with you to say, okay, let's kind of cobble this through. And for the last 2 years, we've done like we've done with other counties and said, okay, we know that you're working towards something. There's something on the horizon. Let's get through this. But if we don't make a decision, we meaning you, we have to really get into the nitty gritty on your building, because that's the crux here. If you have remodeling done, that's considered a substantial remodel. You have to bring that building up to the current code. The code that I oversee for your building, you're operating 2 codes ago on it and have been grandfathered through. What that means is if you start changing things in a substantial manner, the code requires things that you simply don't have. You don't have the required programming space. You don't have the required physical exercise space. Your kitchen is being half maintained in a garage. That's not adequate space. You don't have medical space that's adequate. There's so many things functioning wrong with that facility as it relates to the updated code. Not to mention, if you take a look at your ceiling, it clearly needs to be replaced, which is a reflection of the roof, which is all sorts of a myriad of issues. So at some point, we have to really look at that and say, when is enough on our side? Because I have to consider safety, adequacy, and fitness on behalf of the folks that are incarcerated. At what point does that line get drawn? From my perspective, you're at it. So we talk about, other than space, even your cell space is not the appropriate size. You have CMU, you've got block walls that are starting to deteriorate and crack. Your plumbing is cracking. It's beyond repair in some instances. So when you look at that safety component, and I give the jail administrator a great kudos here because he has done one heck of a job in trying to maintain that facility, your locking mechanism, your cameras, all of these things are so outdated that you've got safety concerns. So let alone, the sheriff touched on your dispatch and your jail. It's not separated. We don't have a code on that, but you can see the safety concerns that you have for your dispatchers that are in that facility. Tonight I went through again and I couldn't get through because we had a domestic arrest violence coming through. You've got a whole lot of things going on there that I implore you to get down there and see it for yourselves if you haven't been there. So we've talked about HVAC in the past, but that's still there, you know, a concern for all of your equipment. The last time the pipes ruptured, which I'm assuming they probably will again in the spring, you have buckets in your cells collecting water. That's not safe. It's not safe for inmates in there that are unpredictable. You can't properly classify these inmates with the space that you have. That's a requirement. You've got to be able to do that. That means you're housing out. That's why you're housing out a lot of people and your females, because you can't adequately meet the statutory requirement. So I don't know if we want to go on to that next piece, if that next.
Nancy,
So-
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are there any questions before I go on?
Yeah, I think let's do each of Sheriff, if it's okay. I think best that we talk first about the facility itself before the next issue, so that way those questions can be answered before we would go to the next one, if that would be okay, Ms. Thielen.
Yes, and actually I just threw a whole lot at you. So, and if ever anybody has any questions, as with the board, which I sat on that committee for the last 2 years, going back and forth with emails, with questions, with commonalities with different sites, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Lukes.
If the board fails to do anything.
Mr. Lukes, you're.
Sir, push the green button.
It's on. Push that gently.
I tap it. Tap to see if. We're gonna get you a red paddle and a green paddle. So red will be no, green yes. Sorry, but it's very difficult to hear you if that microphone isn't working.
Thank you. If the board fails to do anything, what kind of timeline could you give us, a date? Would the state condemn our jail?
That is a huge question, and I figured it was going to be asked at some point. We don't like to get into that business, quite frankly. We like to work, our office likes to work with the county to say, what can we do? What direction are we going? If there's nothing done and the jail is deemed as not safe with adequacy and fitness for the occupants, and we can't find by some mechanism, I've gone down the road of structural engineering requirements for our records, things like that. If we get to the end of the game here, does our office have the statutory authority to shut it down? Yes. At that point, we would do something called an order. There's a 6-month piece in there to say, okay, within 6 months, we need an answer to X, Y, or Z. We've only done that once in the history of the state of Wisconsin. I don't want to go down that road. I'm hoping we don't have to go down that road. I thought with the committee reforming again, that maybe we wouldn't have to revisit that at all. I'd like for that not to be an option, but yes, it's absolutely there. Can I give you a date right now? No.
Thank you.
So under the repairs, you state that significant repairs, isn't substantial remodeling will mandate. Well, what is the definition of substantial? A roof would not be considered substantial. Repairs to plumbing would not be considered substantial, or
Not
would they?
necessarily. No,
Okay.
that could be very much substantial. To
so-
your particular facility, our office does not define it. However, the state of Wisconsin does within the building codes.
Okay.
And it talks about a value, anything over 50% of the value. Well, 50% of the value of your current building may not be a whole lot.
And what
So-
would be the period in which that 50% value would apply? So for example, if you put on a new roof 1 year, the next year you make various other repairs. Is that cumulative from the life of the building or from a particular period of time?
Typically, we sit down with a particular period of time based on something that's been an arrangement to say, look, we, Kewaunee County, are working on this. This is our anticipated date for correcting this, and this is what we're going to do. I mean, we're in a position where, you know, we don't like to come in and say, okay, Kewaunee County, you have to fix this by June 1. That's an impossible task, given what you have. So we work with you, you work with us, we figure it out and we move forward. But if something happens in the meantime, what would happen is, say if you had a cell block that wasn't functioning, that cell block, I would then decommission it. It cannot be used until it's fixed. And if it became a substantial remodel to fix it, that's what it would take, was when that substantial remodel would be done and you wouldn't have access to that cell block.
So is there a list of deficiencies that we have been given that would need to
Yes,
be
every year in your
corrected?
jail inspection.
Okay. And so is it your opinion that we cannot make repairs to make this facility functional for a longer period of time?
No, you can do and make any types of repairs you want. That's what this board is for, is to vet through that. As a matter of all of the other jail study committees and jail projects that I have been on and currently have been on, I typically don't see that route because the cost is so outweighing. I can't say that because I'm not doing the study right now on it. I can only bring you what it needs to make this jail come to fruition. You can certainly renovate it. With that being said, there's space that has to be gained to accommodate the pieces that you don't have that are required in the code. So there's cost to that. It would have to be vetted through by someone else. I don't do that for you, no.
I understand that. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Question,
Supervisor Romden?
a hypothetical for you. If for some reason it's the will of the county not to build a new jail, what kind of mandated upgrades will the state put on the county?
Well, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis again. Like right now, when I went through today, may seem like a small task, but the ceiling needs to be replaced. You've got blocks in there that are starting to crack again that need to be replaced. All of those things. I spoke with the command staff and said, we need to come up with a punch list of something, because at this point, if nothing is going to go forward, then we don't really have this, okay, we're working on it anymore. Then it's done and we need to say, okay, now I'm identifying specifically areas that need to be done.
So there is no punch list currently?
Yes, there's a punch list. I think you're mixing that up a little bit. I've identified areas that need to be addressed.
Okay.
We have not dug deep into say, hey, this actually is something that needs to be done, because when we agreed to over 2 years ago, 4 years ago, but 2 years ago, Kewaunee County said to me, we identify this, we know something needs to be done, we are working on a jail study to correct all of these issues. So that's what was being done.
Thank you. Are there other questions at this point? Okay.
So I was asked this question by the sheriff, and I'm not sure if there's some misinformation that may be floating around. I was told that there's some thought that there's going to be a Department of Corrections prison being built in Kewaunee County. I wanted to make sure that the board knew that the state of Wisconsin Department of Corrections has no funding allocated for a new adult institution at this time now, nor do we in long-term planning. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. I was also told that if a prison would be built, that a jail could be built with it, and staff could operate in both areas. Statutorily, that is not possible. If you change the statutory language, it could be, but it's not. Jails and prisons are two separate entities with two separate statutes and administrative code requirements. And the staffing is absolutely not interchangeable. They are run by two different entities.
I actually
So I'm
talked.
not sure where that
comes from
there's-
Joe Kitchens,
Okay,
our assemblyman. I actually talked to him
Sure.
in the last few days, and he said that there is certainly a chance, at some point, the prison in Green Bay is going to have to be replaced. It's in worse shape than our jail, right? And,
well, it's not in that great of shape.
no, it's not in
how-
great shape, and it
no,
costs more
and-
to operate than it would to build. So, and they were, there was nearly a override of the governor's veto previous. So there is discussion about it. And so the issue was that if a facility was built, there could be a separate pod for the county jail onto that. And it was his opinion that that would reap savings for us.
Well, I don't want to mince things because I wasn't a part of your conversation, but I can tell you that that is not statutorily allowed. If they change the state statute, possibly, there's no capital outlay right now, period. And if there were, if the legislature were to come back and say, okay, we want to take a look at this, that you're talking 6, 8, 10 years before that could even be accomplished. So I checked with the secretary for our department on it to make sure there were no sidebar conversations, and that was refuted. So I wanted to make sure that that was brought up here tonight. I've got nothing but.
Any questions for Nancy?
I have one question.
Sure.
And I asked Matt this last meeting. So I believe Brown County built a jail a couple years ago, correct? And,
We're building it right now. I'm on that project too.
okay,
Yep.
and I know that they have been taking inmates to other counties. So I said something about having, if we build, and we're gonna have extra space at the time, can we house other inmates to bring some money, revenue into our county? Is that a possibility? I know Matt, gave out his opinion on it, but I wanted to hear what your opinion was.
Well, I always say, and I've worked with a lot of counties on building their new projects, you build for yourself. You make sure that you're building for your county and for your needs. Now, there are several counties that have built in addition because the time was right, the funding was right. They added a few extra beds and are choosing to rent those out to make a little extra money. Absolutely okay, as long as it's fiscally responsible and you have it staffed appropriately. So it can be done in a very controlled manner. I would not suggest personally or professionally that you build a jail specifically to rent inmates or rent beds. But yeah, and we do have. So we're building another pod right now in Brown County, which would be bigger than actually this jail. So I've got 126 beds going up over there. And right now they are shipping some out for that reason. Got another jail going up right now in Chilton in Calumet County, facing the same issues you did. So we're looking at probably about the same size, quite frankly. And that's supposed to be done now this fall, but a lot of things happening. So
Nancy, I think one of the biggest issues that I'm hearing from the board is the question, and this is where we probably need to get more information, is at what point does, and I know cities do this with dilapidated housing and the like, is to what level does a repair or a renovation now trigger the requirement to adhere to new codes, to new building codes? And I'm not saying that you would have an answer right now, but I'm going to guess that for this committee, that is probably the biggest question, in the respect that if, and I think this is where the study committee first came and had eliminated a couple of the items about adding repairs to the current building on site, because it was believed that any type of major repairs would have triggered that requirement to adhere to new codes. And therefore, that's why it was rejected by the study committee. But I think that's probably the biggest issue that at least I myself would be looking for some guidance from you and from the state.
Well, and unfortunately, we don't have a clear-cut line on it. That's why we would have to take a look at it. We would have to confer with the codes. I'm sure legal would get involved at some point, because that's something that is a huge decision for this board of people. What I have tended to look at in the past is a wall restructuring that can trigger some of it. If you were looking at changing a housing area, that has triggered it in the past. But each one of these is a case-by-case basis. Just like in our code, we offer up pieces to the code where you can request a variance. We variance things on a case-by-case basis for some operations, whether it be a reduction, like for instance in ceiling tiles. We have done that in some certain areas, because right now the code says if you put in a ceiling, it has to be X rated. So it's got to be this or that, and it has to be detention strength. It's not detention strength now. A detention strength ceiling for you right now would be a large expense. A door would be a large expense. A plain, not to misguide you with any numbers, but an example of a plain detention door is about $10,000. So you look at some of those things and how much does it add up to? And that's the information, I agree with you, needs to be looked at a little bit closer, so that you have a better understanding as a full board to what all of that comes back to. So I think that's a valid point.
Thank you.
Supervisor Fuller-Wider, please.
Did I understand you to say that there is a similar sized facility being built somewhere else in the state?
Yeah, right now.
So do you happen to know what the cost of that project is?
I'd have to look at my book, but it's right around the 30 mark. But that's a full jail and Sheriff's Department renovation. It's in Chilton in Calumet County, just south of here.
Okay, because I mean, the architect had said that, you can't just have something over here and compare it to what we're going to do. And to me, it seems like, if you're going to build a house, and it's going to be a raised ranch and how many square feet, that you can get a pretty good idea on what a cost assessment's going to be without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on an architect to draw up your own personal exact thing what you want. So I was just hopeful that we could maybe get some information on numbers like that to help us understand. And then, we're not backed into a corner where we have to build exactly what our architect drew up. If we wanted to change something, let's say Matt and his team says, hey, we really don't want that to be there. We'd rather have it here. And we can make changes before we even have the architects draw up our own personal thing.
Well, and
cost savings.
And actually what you're talking about too, when we talk about the building, and I work with several different architectural firms, the architectural firm that's doing the project in Calumet County is different than the one that has been here so far. I've worked with both of them equally, but one of the things that I come to all of the committee meetings and say, it is your building. You are the owner. The architect is the designer for what you want. And that's why we don't have any cookie cutter plans. We've got some, because everybody has a different philosophy on how things should be. But the buildings that I've worked on recently, which would be Green Lake County, Oconto County, Calumet County, Brown, working on Trumpelow County, which would be about the same size. They're in their phase 3 right now, design development. They're very similar. It's just a matter of tweaking whatever you choose for your location. That's a huge factor. So as far as roads, deliveries, logistical, so that can kind of configure some of it, but it is your building. So whatever.
Right,
owner
and that's
says.
my point, that essentially we're not reinventing the wheel here. I mean, we're doing these pods and the things, it's the new technology for overseeing the inmate population. And, that work has already been proven, engineered, and built. So I just don't know that initially we need to get both feet in at hundreds of thousands of dollars without making our own adjustments, what our personal needs would be as Kewaunee County. So that's just a thing between the architect and us, obviously, but I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, and I think, not to drag this on, but I think we've done a really good job on the projects that I've been involved in. When I come in from the state side of things, I come in more so representing you and trying to make sure you're getting what you want. I work through the whole entire process to say, okay, did you hear this? Because you're not building a jail every day. You need somebody that's going to speak on the county side and try to interpret some of it. I have gone in trying to make sure that it can run with the leanest amount of staff, that it makes sense, and that it's what you want. So those are imperative.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. You just talked about the staffing. So with putting in a new jail, we're coming from a jail that obviously, as you said, is in not good shape. So putting up something new, is that meaning that in all your other counties where they put up new, they right away increase that staffing, or are they able to keep what they have for staffing or minimize increasing it? Because that's the next thing with the taxpayers, is not only what we're gonna put for how much it is, but for the operating cost.
We would be adding 7 positions, correct?
I have
7.
not taken a look at that staffing analysis. We aren't at that point yet for me.
We are.
That's another $64,000 question, because it depends on your rotations. It depends on the physical layout and what you come up with your staffing analysis. You have an added issue that I know you've been dealing with that is outside of physical plant. I'm more or less looking at the physical plant piece. You also have another layer on that. That's undeniable, because you are a combined center. I think there's 6 left in the state. And I'm working with Marquette County right now on separating theirs and building a new addition for intake. So that's a whole another piece to it that needs to be studied.
So is it typical, though, that you build a new jail and you have to dramatically increase staffing? That seems counterintuitive to me.
It depends on whether or not your staffing is adequate to begin with. I mean, not to throw a whole nother bubble in there, but it depends on what your staffing is to begin with. When you look at a facility, and typically with something this size that would be coming up, you have to do a full staffing analysis. The county does that. The Sheriff's Department does that based on NIC guidelines and national recommendations. You're looking at most likely 3 posts. In a nutshell, I don't know if that's what it's going to end up being, but typically that's what I see. You have somebody in booking, somebody in master control, and somebody that's roving throughout the pod. That's a typical facility. So what that means for you later on, I don't know the answer to that.
So talking about 911 and separating the dispatch, are there any situations in which 911 is not done in the same county where you have a joint 911 center? What are the regulations on that?
Well, I don't oversee that, so I don't know what the regulations are. I do know that there's no requirement on our code for whether it's in or out. So that is a county decision. You have to look at all of the things that you can actually get a lot of answers from your jail administrator right now. As a former jail administrator myself, who used to operate and oversee a 911 emergency dispatch center that was in a facility. It's very hard to hire staff. I'm going completely off script, but there's a lot to do with it and with the regulations that have come up. So I know enough to be dangerous on the other end because I've done it myself. But now for me in my position right now, I'm focusing on the physical plant of your current jail. But you do have big discussions to have.
Other questions? Supervisor Dale.
So let me ask you this. If what you're trying to say is that on the old building, that if you had it, have it all compliant with the way it's supposed to be, you're basically, your rooms aren't big enough. The hallways aren't big enough. All the plumbing is no good. You're talking electrical, the roof, and now you're talking foundation. So you're basically talking about a new building.
Those are all factors that come into play, yeah. And when,
Because once you start, you ain't
Right.
gonna finish. So
Right.
if you start tearing something apart, so I don't know if everybody realizes that, but it's something that everybody on the board should understand. Just coming from me being in the business, once you start, you can't stop. So if you start remodeling, you are not gonna be able to stop until it's all done. By the time you're done, you have a new building.
potentially, yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
Any other questions?
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'm going to speak to Kim's question real quick. So yes, if we were to, the first question about building, absolutely. If all of a sudden Brown County ran into a pinch and we had room for one or two, we're always going to help out our adjacent counties, our fellow sheriff's departments. To your second question about staffing, we're not looking to significantly increase staff because of the project, right? We are actually woefully inadequately staffed and have been for 50 years. This whole jailer dispatcher arrangement has to end. Whether it ends where we are or whether it ends in a new building, like Nancy said, they're just slowly transitioning out of it. I know Iowa County is transitioning, Marquette County is transitioning. It's a thing of the past. It can't happen. So that's one of the main reasons. But if we looked at the flow and what we're trying to do is it minimizes it. So we're looking at one dispatcher, which is currently what we have. Okay. And then the booking, which isn't all the time, right? You're not always booking people in. So we're looking at these options of doing a hybrid position that we can share. All right. There are some positions that are constant and have to be there. Master control, right? Door monitoring. So those have to be there. So yes, the max increase or the total net increase for staffing is 7. But again, that should almost be happening now, because of the way we're staffing that thing, but we've been getting away dirt cheap for 5 decades. So that's the issue. That's the issue with the staffing. But again, by designing this in the right way, we can absolutely minimize that staffing, which is the point of trying to farm out dispatch. You're still going to have a dispatcher. We've had this discussion with other counties, and they're going to require at least 1, maybe 2, that are going to handle just Kewaunee County, where they're not going to do that for free because they like us. They're going to in turn charge us what it costs them in staffing. So this idea of trying to save money by cutting things up and farming things out, we've gone down that path, and nobody's going to do it for free. Whether that's housing or whether that's dispatch, we've got to take care of our own. This is our community. This is our responsibility. To the point of the drawings, I agree with you completely, Jeff. The issue is going to phase 3 with the things you talked about, that we can look at a drawing and say, we have to be able to reconfigure this a little differently because we're going to still be maintaining this communications component with the jail. Calumet's not doing it. Iowa's not doing it. So this is unique. And so this isn't something that you and I can sit down with an erector set and a pencil and say, well, let's just redesign these walls. You have to realize that as of the end of phase 2, our consultant is no longer under contract. We need guidance. We cannot stumble and trip through the rest of this project. We need that guidance. Yes, it's a significant amount of money, but there's a significant amount of value that comes from that phase 3. Because if we want to actually do that, we want to look at what's going to make Kewaunee unique and how we can maximize staffing. We need that assistance. I can't do that. You can't do that. We have to have that guidance that we've had this far. We can't do this on our own. It's like firing your attorney halfway through a court case. Bad idea. So we need that guidance. We need that guidance. So let's go into the impact. And most of you have been watching this, have been looking at it. You have it on your desk. I printed out a hard copy for you. And I guess I would look to Mr. Feld to maybe speak to this a little bit.
Thank you, Sheriff. I had had the finance director, Paul Kunish, put together some numbers as to the estimated or projected costs. Venture Architects did go with another cost estimator, the Samuels Group, and they provided an estimated cost just of the housing pod and support services. That would be roughly approximately $21 million. You also have in there a cost of roughly $1 million for operational costs. That would be for staffing and any other support items that would be there. If you look at therefore the impact of $21 million from a capital cost and $1 million for operational costs, you would be seeing that would be an additional $1.45 per thousand. So that would be roughly for a $100,000 home, $145.43. If you do it for our average home, which is assessed at $157,700, that would be $229.34. And for a home of $200,000, that would be $290.86.
So nearly $6,000 is what each home will be paying.
No, I'm sorry. The $300 is what would be additional onto the tax bill. So it's not $300. It's $300. So let's say it's a $200,000 home. Your tax bill would increase by $290.86.
Yes, for 20 years, over the 20 years. That's about just about 6,000, right?
Correct. Sorry, I didn't know you were going for 20 years, Mr. Chair.
That's what it's going to cost, folks, about $6,000 bucks. Yes.
I got a question concerning the 21 million. Does that include the finance costs?
Yes. What if from the item, the fees and the like would be about $252,000.
And then when the 20 years is up, that $1 million a year remains, correct?
Correct.
Forever.
It'll be more than $1 million.
Be more than $1 million by then.
Again, usually with any project like this, it is not the building that is the largest cost, it is always the staffing that is the largest cost. Whether that is a jail, whether that is this building itself that debt was taken out for, more often than not, it is not the building that will cost you the most money. It'll be the staffing and the maintenance for the life of the building.
Supervisor Wagner.
I'm not sure at this point, if we could have the sheriff maybe comment on this. I think everybody might understand this, but that the jail, every county's jail is your single largest liability in your county. Your highway department also is an extremely high liability department because accidents can happen and things of that sort. I think, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, okay? I really don't want to do that. But I think in order to have our eyes fully wide open, we need to understand the liability exposure our jail is presenting to Kewaunee County. We are maybe one heartbeat, one wrong move from an extremely costly liability situation. And that jail could cost us, just overnight, it could cost this county many millions of dollars with one case. It's something I've been very cognizant of. And it bothers me.
Are there other, did you have other information, Sheriff?
I have one more slide, but to that point Mr. Wagner made, yeah, Polk County currently is going through $11 million lawsuit. That is tied directly to their linear construction, just like ours, where they had lack of visibility, lack of surveillance, lack of observation. The county is on the hook for an $11 million lawsuit. Now, somebody may say, well, that's why we have insurance. Once that $11 million lawsuit is levied, they're still going to have to do something with the jail. So it's not like you can say, well, let's just gamble. This is inevitable. I feel bad that it's in our lap. as we stand here in 2021, I wish this would have been handled by another sheriff. I'm sure you wish it would have been handled by a different board, but this is our time. This is our time, and we have to lead. It's not going to be easy, but this is what it is. And I want everybody to be included in this. And I thank everyone who's had a part in it so far, and I'm going to thank everyone who's going to be a part of it in the future. So the last part of the three options, and this is where I want to end. We have three options. We can remain status quo, and we can respond to Nancy's mandates and play patchwork and try to make something out of that miserable, that as Mr. Dorner said, that embarrassment. The walls are crumbling. The roof is falling apart. Plumbing, electrical. I mean, at what point do you just say, it's done its job, it's done its duty? It's like a vehicle with 300,000 miles on it. You can't just keep putting tires on it. It's time to switch out. But again, that's an option. We can remain status quo and respond to these mandates, and again, gamble on the liability, as Mr. Wagner said. We can reconvene the study committee and come back again. It concerns me that on our study committee, I've got 3 individuals from that committee that voted against going to phase 3. So that's a concern. I like to see unanimity. I like to see consensus. So I think it would be logical to bring it back to that study committee. And those that aren't on it, you're more than welcome to attend and be part of those conversations. And I think with what I'm seeing, as far as the consensus of this board currently, that's probably a good place to go so that we can build that consensus. So when we come out of that room, we can say, this is the best that we've got. Because don't just rely on me. I've been banging this gong for years now, and I know I'm getting to be nothing but an echo chamber. But I have an obligation. I have a constitutional obligation that none of you have. It is listed in the Wisconsin Constitution that I care for those individuals remanded to the jail. That's on me. So I take this very personally. But I appreciate all the support that's been given over the years to provide the resources to do my constitutional job. And the final one is just to approve the phase 3. Again, I don't know if we're there as a consensus. So I leave that up to you. That's really the end of our presentation, because it is ultimately up to you. Those are really the 3 choices before us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one more item, if I may, just from a financial standpoint, just for consideration of the board. It is part of my job to look into the future, both from the financial sustainability and the financial health of the county. I can tell you that at this point in time, money is about as cheap as you're ever going to get it. Interest rates are low. So a consideration that the board may want to consider is that if we make renovations and we do that for another, and let's just say 5-7 years or the like, I do not believe that interest rate, and then eventually there will still be a day and time that we will have to replace this facility. Therefore, the money that we will need to take out to replace that facility, the interest rate will be higher, the price tag will be higher. So from a financial standpoint, just from a debt capacity and interest rate standpoint, now is probably one of the most opportune times that a government can take to issue debt to do capital projects.
All right, thank you.
Could I have just one more addition here?
Matt covered everything very well. I just want to add a few points that maybe could be covered a little bit better, I guess. I'll be short, so I won't take more than a couple minutes additional of your time. But I do want you to realize the state and the population that we're dealing with in the county jail is only going to go up from here. If you listen to what's going on with the state legislature right now, they talk about emptying out the jails. They're not looking for additional space. We're not contracting with other states anymore. What that means is it isn't like they're just going to let inmates out and they're not going to do anything wrong again. They're basically transferring inmates from the state system to the county system. And the way they do that is they put them on probation, they make early release, and then they put stipulations on probation that now you have easier ways to hold people for short periods of time. So really, they're just transferring the population from the state to the county. So if anything, we are going to be in more need of space in the future than what we even have now, at least for the short term, being the next few years. Phase 3, just to talk a little bit more about why it really is important to go to phase 3. You're right, we can kind of build a raised ranch, and you can look at other raised ranches and say that's kind of what we need. But every county is different, and our county is very unique. We're trying to do something, and Nancy, in theory, has said it would be okay with only adding 7 more staff. That's because we're still going to dual role people, and we're going to have them dispatch and jail. That isn't done, to my knowledge, in any other county with a new jail going up. So that really is unique. And in order for that to go, we need the plans to be able to say, yes, in theory it works, and on paper it works. So we would be able to go with that plan. If we just go with phase 2, the 7 staff is a guess, really, at this point. Maybe it'll be more than that, maybe it'll be less. But realize that without decent plans, we really don't know what staffing is. We have to look at it. And we have to look at the pod, and the pod itself changes the price of the jail a lot. And the reason we have to look at that is because what kind of inmates does Kewaunee County have? Do we have more max inmates? Do we have more minimum? And little things make a big difference, like how many positive pressure cells you need. So that really changes the cost of the jail. And it's hard to sell something if this did go to referendum to the public. Well, 21 million-ish. It might be 25. It might be, it might be 19. I don't think it's going to go down a whole lot from there, but it's really hard to sell something when you really don't know what the price is or what it looks like. Fixing up the jail. One of the things that I look at with that, and I think you really got to consider, let's just say you put a new roof on, and that roof is supposed to last 50 years, 40 years maybe. I don't know really what flat rubber roofs last, but we're going to stick that kind of money into a current facility, knowing that we're only going to use maybe 5 years of the life of that roof. That seems like a lot of wasted money. The same thing with bunks, doors, anything you do at that jail. Those things are intended, the reason of the cost is that they're intended to last 40, 50 years. And you're not going to be able to move them, just so you know. If you put new bunks in, you put new doors, and you build a new facility in 5 years, 6 years, it isn't like you can recoup some of your cost and reuse those doors in the new facility. They are junk when you're done. Nobody's going to buy them used or anything like that. There was a lot, and finally, there was a lot of work done by this jail study committee where we really did dive into all the different options, and there were more options than that. That's what we narrowed it down to. I definitely invite anybody here that wants to get more information and really dive into it. If anybody that's skeptical about this, come on in and sit down with us, and we are more than glad to go through all of the work that has been done and tell you about the conversations that went and why we eliminated certain things. So that office is open anytime anybody wants to come.
All right, thank you. Mr. Felt, you have a report?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have just a few things. Just so everyone is aware, for those that are at the county board meeting, you will not see, but WBAY did come to do an interview regarding the housing study that was presented to the executive committee. Just so everyone is aware, there is nothing in there about what are the next steps. That is discussion to be had by the committee and the county board. Second, I wanted to congratulate Dave and all the staff out at Winter Park. Again, another record attendance out at Winter Park. As you know, we have tubing there, we have skiing, and now we have ice skating. It is truly Winter Park, and Dave and all the staff and the volunteers should be commended for all the work there. For Kewaunee County Economic Development Corporation, you may not have seen the announcement. There is a new executive director. It is Ben Nelson, who was formerly in Door County with Parks. He is now the new executive director for KCDC. In addition, Door Kewaunee Legislative Days will be going on this year in 2021. From what we've been able to see in our discussions with Representative Joel Kitchens, more than likely that event will be held virtually, but we are always looking for participants. So you won't have to travel anywhere. There'll be no hotel. It instead will be Zoom. And anyone that is interested, please contact KCEDC or myself or Judy Knutson over at Extension. Finally, we continue to work with Bug Tussle regarding broadband to move forward. As you know, they did their report. We are having some of those towers coming in front of town boards to get the appropriate conditional use permits. And again, we're continuing to do that, and we feel very confident that we'll continue to move forward. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. And thank you, Dave, for all of the excellent work down there. I have not gotten down to see the ice skating rink yet. I look forward to it. Mastler offered to take me ice skating, but I wasn't able, so I'm looking forward to that. Committee reports, I'm going to take them all at once. We'll have, is Cindy here? Over there. We'll wait for the end. If there are any questions on any of the other reports, going to take them at once due to the time constraints here. If there are questions on any minutes or reports, yes, please state which one.
In Human Services, last week, I'm not sure if anybody's caught it or not, Channel 5 had an article, had a story about, and it was centered or talked, it was done with a CBRF or assisted living facility in the county. And I guess I remember when I was on Human Services a few years ago, the reimbursement costs that these CBRFs are getting once a person's finances go to the point of, let's say, zero, or let's call it that. I mean, it's not zero, but when it gets down to a certain point and the state, Medicaid, picks up those costs, we have two companies that can be contracted with for the county. And those two companies have reduced the amount that they are reimbursing these facilities. And it's gotten to the point where what they're being reimbursed is not enough to cover their costs. And so I'm wondering, or I'm hoping that our Human Services Department has been discussing this a little bit, and even to the point of contacting our state legislators, because I'm thinking that's probably going to need some work from that end.
Supervisor Wagner, we have not specifically had those discussions within committee, but we are having those discussions from a department and counties level. Both WICSA, which is the Wisconsin Counties Human Services Administrators Group, as well as the Wisconsin Counties Association Group, as well as the Wisconsin Counties Executive and Administrators Group, have all been identifying the lack of state reimbursement for a lot of these programs. And we are putting together position papers and budget requests for those items. It is hoped that in the governor's budget that we will see some additional funding for that. We have seen some things come out early that deal with additional funding for childcare, but that's only one side of the spectrum.
Any other questions on any of the minutes, any of the reports? Okay, with that, Cindy, I'm assuming you would like to tell us something about vaccinations.
I will give you a quick update on what's going on with COVID. So as of today, actually as of yesterday, we had 32 active cases in the county and 2,498 that had been cleared with 34 deaths. To my knowledge, as of today, we had no hospitalizations and 8,621 people had tested negative. As far as vaccination, which has been our really big push for the last 4 to 5 weeks, we have, as of this afternoon at 5, completed 930 first dose vaccines just through the county and 240 second dose. By the end of the week, we will have completed 420 second dose. So we're sitting at about 1,500 doses given in the county just from us. In addition to that, we do have pharmacy entities that have gone into some of our nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities and completed those doses there. Our wait list continues. It's a popular place right now. So we have about 1,147 at the end of today that are still on the wait list. We're intending to just continue to knock away at that little by little each week. Our vaccine allotments remain low, but we're getting more than some of our neighboring counties. So I tend to ask for about 500 doses a week. This week they gave us 175. Last week it was 150, or 100, but Door County had 50 given to them. Green Lake County got 30 doses. So some of those allotments are just pitiful. And I'm happy to say that we're at least able to get some done out in the community. So we're going to continue. 2 new variant cases were found in the state. So just so you're aware, those variant COVID cases are out there. The ones that I think they're seeing are coming out of England. And we're keeping an eye on that. As far as I know, they believe that the vaccines are covering those variants as well. Questions for me on anything? I do want you to know also, before I stop, that I did reach out on that vaccine allotment. I've made it pretty well known throughout the state that I was kind of ticked off that we weren't getting more. My push is that we don't have a hospital, we don't have public transportation, we don't have clinics that are giving that. And to my knowledge right now, Kewaunee County Public Health is the only vaccinator actively vaccinating in Kewaunee County. And so I raised a little stink up at the state level, and I think they've heard us a little bit. So we are getting a few more doses than our neighboring counties. I've made it aware to Joel Kitchens, to Andre Jacques' office, to the governor's office. So they're all aware that we need to continue to get the vaccine out here, because it's completely irresponsible on their part to think that our seniors are going to drive all the way to Oshkosh or to the other side of even Green Bay or Appleton to get those shots.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Cindy, how are you and your department doing?
We're busy. We're doing okay. So our staff is holding our own. We have had a lot of volunteers come out to give us hands. So we've got some seniors and that are helping us at our clinics, just doing basic things like sanitizing chairs and tables and things like that. I've had a number of nurses and physicians that have reached out to offer their services as vaccinators. Our EMTs are volunteering their time to do watches for the 15-minute observation after that shot. And more of our EMTs have even offered to do vaccinations if we can do some evening clinics once we get to the school populations and the teachers and things like that. So we're doing okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cindy.
One other question.
Sorry.
Of the 1,147 on the wait list, is that mostly 65 and over, or is that, can you talk to that at all?
It ranges from 20 and up. So we don't put kids on the list, obviously. But it does have some special needs people, some chronic condition related people. We have some caregivers on there. We have some people that qualify as essential workers. And when that 1B essential worker category will open up, they will be called. So it's a range of everybody. I would say probably 65 to 70% are 65 and up, but we do have other ages in a good mix. We have a small separate list outside of that 1,147 that qualify as 1A, and we're waiting for our next batch of vaccine. But within that, we will do some of the human services clients, or caregivers, I should say. It's the caregivers of the clients that fall under family care, IRIS, Lakeland Services, those kind of things. And then we also have our transportation drivers that will qualify as well. So there's a small sub list over there, but we'll get those done hopefully in the next week.
Okay, moving on. First reading of ordinance.
A resolution granting a petition for bridge aid, Town of Red River, fiscal impact statement, $39,596 from County Aid Bridge Fund.
Okay, we moved past ordinance. Since there were none, it went to resolutions, but that's great. Supervisor Poppy moves.
Second.
Second by Romden. Discussion. Supervisor Baker.
Two questions. Was this budgeted for, and what is the reason we're making this repair?
We don't have Every here,
No.
but we have
Number one, it is budgeted, and number two, it's a large culvert pipe that needs to be replaced. So it falls under what they call bridge aid. Anything over.
But what is is it like dangerous to drive over, or is this like a routine repair we do?
Culvert pipe failed.
Oh, you can't drive over right now?
Well, I'm not sure if you can drive over it, but it
Okay,
has, the bottom is gone on it, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to try this again. Mr. Lining, are we ready to vote, or is this? It's on. Okay, register your vote, please. One more. All right, everybody vote twice. Or some. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Motion carries. All right, next resolution, please. Yes, I would like, I think we have people here associated with this. If Mr. Myers would like to introduce anyone, and we'll read the letter that was sent, and we'll give you quite a bit of time. I'm not going to give you the full 90 minutes we had for the Sheriff's Department, but you take whatever you want within reason.
Thank you, Ross. All right, I have a few members of the Zoological Society with us tonight. Pam Zander, who's president, and Brad Conan, treasurer. And I have sent out a packet. We have a letter from Steve Bremer. I guess I can read that out loud if that works for everybody.
Absolutely.
Steve Bremer is a gentleman who's going to be donating the money. I'll back up, sorry, Ross. From Steve, he says, with my gifts to the Zoological Society of Kewaunee County of $20,000 for the African animal exhibit and $100,000 for the ornamental pheasant enclosure, I am writing the next chapter in the philanthropy of the Bremer family. The Bremer Park Zoo was founded in 1936 due to the efforts and generosity of my grandfather, Leo Bremer, and his brother Otto, my great uncle, in honor of their father, Judge Lewis Bremer, my great grandfather, after whom the zoo is named. He says their photos, by the way, can be found in the Historical Society on Ellis Street. He says, as a youngster in the 1950s, I fondly remember visiting my grandparents in Kewaunee at 1122 Milwaukee Street. On a Friday night, we would drive up from Madison where we lived. On Saturday morning, my grandmother would take my sister and myself to Woolworth's downtown, give each of us $1 to buy whatever we wanted. On Saturday afternoon, my grandfather would take us to the zoo where we had a picnic and then toured the grounds. Of course, the zoo was not as grand as the one we had in Madison. No elephants or zebras or lions, but foxes, peacocks, deers, goats, and a bear. Alas, there's no longer a bear, but the zoo still has its charm, and it is in Kewaunee's backyard, and it is free. Perfect for area families of young children. I hope the gifts I am making in the matching funds offered by Kewaunee County will invigorate the Bremer Park Zoo. I will follow with interest the spring installation of our 4 new animal statues, which, along with the statue of the giraffe Melvin, will constitute the new African exhibit. I envision new landscaping that will mimic the African savanna and therefore give visitors a real feel for the African animal kingdom. I am especially enthusiastic about the creation of the new pheasant enclosure, which will showcase a variety of ornamental pheasants. With this new exhibit, the hope is that the Bremer Park Zoo might become to pheasant lovers what the International Crane Foundation in Baraboo is to crane lovers. I am grateful to the Kewaunee County Board for matching the funds that I am contributing to the improvements to the Bremer Park Zoo. Now with that, a packet was emailed out and given to everybody here in paper form. We have I'll flip to it. Basically an overview of the master plan of what the zoo group's been working towards. I don't know if you'd like to talk about that or not, but I'm doing good. All right. I'll do my best. And with that, we have right now the funding, if everything goes through, will basically get us an exhibit that's going to house, anywhere from 8 to 12 enclosures with different pheasants. We had some examples attached to the packet, and that's all part of the grand, master plan of this park. So this is kind of the stepping stone to move on to a new environmental education center, which we have, as anybody's been to Bremer Park, a beautiful park, but we have facilities that are very, very, very old, older from back when the lime kilns were there. So everything there, the zoo group has done a terrific job of fundraising over the years. We've replaced almost every animal enclosure with new fencing. We brought in a new deer and goat stable. That was all fundraised and grant money, you know, and this is the next big thing for the park to bring us, you know, back to where we should be. Okay. I guess any questions for us?
Very good. Thank you so much. Are there any questions before we go to the motion? Supervisor Yankee, you want to make a motion here? Oh, sorry. Did we read the resolution?
No.
I'm trying to move it along here.
A resolution authorizing acceptance of donation and approval of donation agreement, pheasant exhibit at Bremer Park, 2/3 vote required. Fiscal impact, total project estimate 300,000, county contribution is 100,000 from general fund, unassigned fund balance.
Now Supervisor Yankee moves.
Yes, I move to approve the county's portion of this exhibit.
Excellent. Is there a second? Supervisor Dell. Discussion. Supervisor Teske, then Supervisor Gillett.
That fiscal impact statement where we're looking for funds from Kewaunee County for 100,000 from the general fund, unassigned fund balance. I think that part should be up in the body of the resolution. Nowhere do I read where the funds are going to come from other than in that fiscal impact statement. I'd like to see part of that statement be up in the resolution part.
Is that something that can be done without a motion, Mr. Wisdicki, or does it, do you have a comment for me, please? It's not necessary?
I don't know if it's strictly, is this on?
No, it is now. Okay.
I don't know that it's strictly speaking necessary, but if you want to make a motion to amend the resolution, you're certainly welcome to do so. But the resolution captures, I think, what it needs to legally.
It's not going to change the resolution, but I normally, when we do something like that, that amount is always put in the body of the resolution.
If you want to make a motion, we can see what, or not, I don't know, how would we go about that? It would have to be what? We have a motion that would have to be.
I could try to help if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Please do. Help me out.
So there would need to be 2 more lines, or at least 1 more line added in somewhere within the, be it further resolved that $100,000 will be allocated from the county general fund - unassigned to fund the project.
Okay.
Something to that effect.
We should be able to do that without a number 12. What is number 12? Doesn't that?
It just says, it doesn't say where it's coming from.
Yeah. So we could just add that without any, we wouldn't have to make any.
Mr. Felt.
Here, right? Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Teske.
Yes, Supervisor Teske.
You could add it on to line 20 where it says raising the remaining $100,000 in funding with funds to come from.
However you would like to move forward with that, Supervisor Teske, that's fine.
So we could simply add that there, right? If Supervisor Yankee and Supervisor Dell are okay with that? They're okay with that? Okay. Any other discussion?
Just a
Yes,
question.
Supervisor Ramden.
In the resolution, lines 12 and 13 and 19 and 20 basically say the same thing, which is immaterial, I guess. But what happens in the event, and I don't see anything in the agreement that's attached, what happens if the Zoological Society doesn't raise the 100,000? Is the county going to fund whatever shortfall there is, or?
If they don't raise the sufficient funds, we don't have to do.
So I can, as the treasurer, I can speak to the fact that in our bank account as of today, we have 78 of the $100,000 already raised. So I don't foresee getting $22,000 will be an issue. Last year, for example, at Zoo Art, we raised just over $10,000. So assuming COVID goes away here soon, that's basically 2 fundraisers for us.
I'm not opposed to the project. I'm just asking the
No, I
question.
understand the question, yeah.
Legally
And that's
speaking,
it.
we don't have to start or do anything until they have money in hand. Now, if it gets to a point where you want to move forward because you're just wasting time and you are satisfied that you come with money, we're certainly going to document that with that group and make sure they do
Sure.
pay us the remaining balance.
Excellent.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions, discussion on this? Yes, Supervisor Gillett?
I would just like, to point out, for every dollar spent here, we are getting a match of 2. And I think this is an excellent cause, an excellent project. We've been having record attendance at our parks as we're seeing through Winter Park. And someone just made the comment again to me today where even during the winter, we're seeing record attendance at Bremer Park. So this is money well spent. And I think the zoo group has been very successful in their fundraising efforts. And hopefully that this resolution passes. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, it must be a good deal because I was looking through the minutes and I saw that even Supervisor Wokos, the fact that he voted for spending some money, this has got to be a pretty good thing for the county. Any other discussion? Okay, one thing before we go to that vote, I do need to know on the previous resolution, there was a no vote and I need to know who that was. There was one no. You have to own up because we have to have that record. It doesn't show anywhere. So if you voted, so somebody voted no. I feel like I'm in the halls at school. We're going to be here all night until somebody fesses up, okay? People, I do this. I do this on a regular basis for on a daily basis. So
Call the
believe
roll.
me.
Now, was it anybody's intention to vote no on the previous resolution? Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I suspect it was a yes vote.
And we're going to make it a unanimous vote. Is that acceptable? Fabulous. I solved that problem. That's one for the day. All right. You can. We're ready to vote on this motion for the Bremer Park.
Madam Clerk, I would ask for a roll call vote, please. On this current motion to approve this resolution, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Loining, just a quick question. Will we eventually have that like we used to with the old system? We're just not. Oh, I understand. Okay, because otherwise, I was going to say, because otherwise I don't know what progress we've made with this. Excellent. Go ahead.
Augustine,
Yes.
Baker, Dell,
Yes.
Gillett,
Yes.
Haskey,
Yes.
Yonke,
Yes.
Keenard,
Yes.
Kroll.
Yes.
Yes. Lizansky,
Yes.
Lucas. Yes. Masteler. Olson,
Yes.
Poppy,
Yes.
Romden,
Yes.
Swago,
Yes.
Teske,
Yes.
Vollenweider,
Aye.
Wagner, Wokus. 17 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
We got Swaggle.
I'm sorry, 18.
Swaggle and Wokos
Yes.
both to say yes. Oh, I'm on a roll here tonight. All right, thank you so much. We look forward to it going forward in a timely manner. So thank you. Okay. Consideration of ordinance read at previous county board meeting, none, correct? Communications?
From Outagamie County, supports the reauthorization of the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program for 10 years in consideration of the WDNR budget request of $50 million per year. From Lincoln County, support of increased county child support funding. And from Lincoln County, resolution expressing Lincoln County's support for action on climate change.
Thank you. Kewaunee County events. other than everything we heard about down at Winter Park and Bremer Park. So after Mastelier and I go skating this Saturday, we'll have to go check out the park over there. Other events. Bring my knee pads. Bring an ambulance. No other events?
I'll call Tim. He'll take care of you.
Okay. Comments from the chair, salary reviews, please stay after the meeting. Those that are on the salary review committee, please stay after. You're not off yet. As far as the jail goes, we had discussion tonight. I'll get back to you on what our next steps are, or I'll be in touch with the various committees to move forward. Next meeting date. We have March 16th is already set. April 27th is already set. Would need a motion to set May 18th at 6 p.m.
Move to approve.
Supervisor Romden, second by Supervisor Wagner. Any problems with that date, questions? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Supervisor Wagner, second Vollenweider. You have a question on that, Mastelier, or you're just getting warmed up? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Mastelier?